Special focus on speed. Time is money. The need for speed. You already know page load speed is important, but did you know it might be the most important thing you can make sure is working well on your site? It's true. It might be even more important than some of your features. How bad is this problem? The Wolfgang 2016 e-commerce KPI benchmark study says that, and I'm going to quote from this, "We found site speed matters more than any of the website engagement metrics. Server response time enjoyed a conversion rate correlation 3 times stronger than the best engagement metric, average session duration. Because site speed is SEO ranking factor, digital marketers can benefit from a site speed multiplier effect as their faster site also earns more traffic combined with a higher conversion rate." Now, this particular quote has to do with e-commerce, but the fact that poor website performance in terms of speed can affect abandonment on any website, it's something we all need to pay attention to. Here's some more from Wolfgang. Average page load time is 6.5 seconds. This is across the universe that they were studying, of course. This is significantly slower than the 2-second threshold for e-commerce websites recommended by Google. Amazon's research into site speed found that every 1-second delay reduces conversion rate by a whopping 7%. They go on to say, "We found average server response time to be 0.76 seconds. Now that's the server response time, not necessarily the full render time. Then they go on to say, "We also found a strong correlation between low server response times and high conversion rates. This means for every 0.2 of a second you shave off your server response time, you can expect to see an 8% lift in conversion rate. Unsurprisingly, there was also a strong correlation between high server response time and high bounce rate." More of this problem definition. A 1-second delay in page response can result in a 7% reduction in conversions. This is from Kissmetrics, so this is verifying what some other studies have found. Finally, 1 out of 5 online shoppers will abandon their cart because the transaction process was too slow. That's from Radware. So, are you getting all this? These are people you had gotten to come to your site and convinced them to buy, in the case of e-commerce anyway. They were in the process of buying when they left you, and they are less likely to come back than ever. Just a little bit more on the problem definition. I really want to hammer this home. From DoubleClick, the average load time for mobile sites is 19 seconds over 3G connections. We found that 53% of mobile site visits are abandoned if pages take longer than 3 seconds to load. And more from DoubleClick. Sites that loaded in 5 seconds versus 19 seconds were observed to have 60% greater page views per visit and 35% lower bounce rates. And what does Google say about all this? Well, Google owns DoubleClick, so it's some more of the same, really. As we already discussed, 53% of mobile site visitors leave a page that takes longer than 3 seconds to load. I don't mind repeating that because it bears mentioning many times. I really need to drive this point home here. Our research has been eye-opening. For 70% of the page views we analyzed, it took nearly 7 seconds for the visual content above the fold to display on the screen, and it took more than 10 seconds to fully load all visual content above and below the fold. I like to call this generally time to value. When you first start to see things render, you can say, okay, I'm starting to see some things here. But when it takes this long for the visual elements, the things that are going to be your experience, to actually load into the page, that's a problem. Here's a chart from Google that goes over some of the potential for bounce rates as page load time increases. Here's an older report from Shopzilla.com. It's an older case from 2009, but it's still instructive. After all, I don't think people have become more patient over the past decade. It was very generous of them to share this data with the general marketplace. When they brought load times from 6 to 1.2 seconds, their conversions increased from 7 to 12%. Their page views increased 25%. Their SEM-based sessions, their search engine marketing-based sessions, increased 8%. Again, this was almost a decade ago, and speed is even more important now, especially with the prevalence of mobile. Remember, when people are experiencing things over mobile, wireless, and that's going to be slower. Let's look at some more cases. Walmart shared this study from 2012. They experienced a 2% increase in conversions for every 1 second of speed savings, and 1% additional revenue per 1/10 of a second savings in speed. And they also experienced SEO benefits, search engine optimization benefits. 2% increase in conversions for Walmart, 1% additional revenue per 1/10 of a second savings. You know, I could probably go back to Walmart's annual reports because they're a public company and figure out what this meant in terms of dollars. But just think about that. For a company the size of Walmart to be talking about a 1 or 2% increase in conversions, even if it's just for their website, that's kind of incredible. Now, there's also some cascade consequences to bad speed. Slow site speed can affect SEO. Here's what Google has to say. As part of that effort today, whatever that effort was, we're including a new signal in our search ranking algorithms, site speed. Site speed reflects how quickly a website responds to web requests. Let's say this more clearly. If you are slow, Google will hurt you. We do not know exactly how Google uses all of its signals. As I discussed in the SEO section, and as people have talked about online for a very long time, there are many signals that go into Google. SEO, search engine optimization, is a cottage industry all on its own, where people try to reverse engineer what exactly Google's doing, which is essentially impossible because you don't have their whole index, so you're only going to get somewhat close to some ideas. But here they are telling us that site speed is going to be some kind of ranking factor. And why do they do that? Well, it's in their best interest because they want to provide the best experience to users. They also want to siphon up some click-through along the way from some of their pay-per-click ads. So Google's concerned about site speed. We need to be concerned about site speed. And that's on mobile as well as the web, or as well as desktop. So how does it hurt SEO? Again, we can't tell exactly how slow pages can hurt SEO. Google's very vague about this, and this makes sense. They don't necessarily share all the details of their algorithms because then people will just simply game them a bit. So we don't know if slow is based on time to first byte or a full page render and how many seconds is of concern. Google also will do this for your mobile experience. Again, to what degree and when, it's all up to them. Once again, the bottom line, this is happening, and it's going to likely matter more and more over time. So what's the final verdict on speed and search engine optimization? There's really no way to know for sure what the impact is. There are some anecdotal reports and some really impossible to be comprehensive studies, but it's Google's algorithm. It's their secret sauce. Here's the thing though. We've already shown the value of getting load time down. So think of any SEO juice just as a bonus. Now, is this your problem as a product manager? Isn't this the kind of thing that's the responsibility of the CTO and the dev team? Well, yeah, but not really. There are costs to network hardware, bandwidth, and more. That's part of the P&L. So you might have to share that a bit. There are also costs to task time and technical debt to work on speed issues. That resource contention impacts feature work. Let's go back for a little bit and talk about why speed actually matters to users. It may seem obvious, faster is better, but let's think about why in terms of a use case, in terms of how people actually use these products, our web products, our mobile products. It's not just about simple frustration. Human beings have thresholds for short-term memory retention. The idea of flow isn't just for sports or work. We actually have it for everything. When things for which we're in task flow take too long, we can lose our train of thought and become frustrated. And yes, perceived time during a focused task can seem like it's longer than actual time. Are you convinced speed is critical? You had better be. Basically, you have 2 seconds, maybe 3, to start getting some value on your page or into your mobile app. Why is it that pages sometimes load slowly? It could be poor architecture in the first place, from code bloat or non-optimized graphics. That's a big one. In spite of everybody knowing they need to optimize their graphics for web, a lot of times it's just not done properly. There could be unexpected usage loads at times, but that's going to be peak performance issues more than anything else. Perhaps the number one reason is code and tag bloat over time. Things creep into your code. Feature after feature, marketing code tag after tag, these things can add up. Tags and other tools introduce third-party code and content that might not be optimized. Generally speaking, things like tag managers are goodness. However, if they're overly abused, this is what you can end up with, a bloated page. Why else might pages load slowly? There could be too many server requests, and this is worse for mobile. What about really large graphics? Again, poorly optimized graphics. And graphics can take up a large percentage of overall page byte count. Lots of ad calls and other third-party widget calls can also potentially be non-efficient. You need to check on others' code as well if it's running on your page. Why is it that we sometimes have trouble fixing these speed issues at our companies? We've seen a couple large companies in their case studies saying how important it is. Well, part of it is that speed alone isn't really a sexy feature. Who really wants to work on that? That's not something you can show your boss and say, look what I put on the page. You can potentially show people, though, I fixed speed a little bit, and here's how it affected every other key performance indicator we've got. So maybe it is kind of sexy. There's also multiple points along the page load journey that can affect speed, so it can be hard to track down issues. It's kind of a death by 1,000 cuts things. There's so many little things where you need to optimize. You might say, oh, that little thing doesn't matter, but they all add up. And when you're adding things up by milliseconds, it doesn't seem like much, but those do add up into tenths of seconds, and as we've seen, tenths of seconds matter. Mobile has also made things a lot harder. Once upon a time, Bandwidth was very expensive. People were using 56 kbs modems to connect to the internet, and things had to be optimized all the time. Then along came almost ubiquitous broadband. Pages became bloated. We started having megabyte-sized graphics getting downloaded all the time, until the point where pages became megabytes big. However, along came mobile, and now we start to have experience with bandwidth problems again. No, it's not nearly as slow as it used to be when we were connecting to the internet via desktop and modems. However, they're not nearly as fast as desktop speeds either, at least not in the United States, and at least not yet. Let's talk more about some of those speed challenges with mobile. What are they? Bandwidth is one obvious issue. Device processing capability also varies with mobile devices, even the most advanced smartphones. Software may also work differently. For example, browser caches may be less robust and not retain as much information. Mobile latency can change if a user turns a corner or it just happens to be raining out. Multiple requests can be problematic at different cell towers. If mobile is critical to your business, you may need to really analyze things like adaptive versus responsive methods in terms of how you're going to design your pages. What should you be looking at? Generally, as with all things, you're going to take action on the things you're actually measuring. Speed is a KPI you really need to be measuring. Do you have a target load time for things like the first pixels to render? And what about for the total page load? What are your competitors' benchmarks? How are they doing? You need to start by diagnosing your problem or seeing if you had one. Where are you now? What are your baselines? Page speed is made up of both page and site architecture and networking issues. A proper approach to measurement will involve multiple methods. There's two general types of testing, synthetic and real user monitoring. For synthetic, it's basically lab testing. That's using clean browsers and so on. The goal is to understand what the best cases may be. And then there's real user monitoring. And this is where real users are connected to typical net connections, mostly clean browsers, but many types of hardware, latencies involved, and so on. These are really complementary methods. It takes both to give a full picture of what's going on. And even then you won't fully know, but at least you'll have a baseline. You'll have something directional. You'll have something that's ideally accurate, even if it's not very precise. For monitoring speed, there are, as usual, a wide variety of tools, both do-it-yourself and professional enterprise grade for monitoring site performance. You should note, tools that help diagnose and monitor website speed may also provide server uptime monitoring. However, operational monitoring is an entirely separate topic and also has its own dedicated tool sets. Let's take a look at some basic tools that are available to us right now. With Chrome, we can use developer tools. Use the Network tab to see load times for elements and whole pages. You can disable your cache, you can throttle speed, and determine scripts that block rendering. We've also got Google's Insights. Google has an online product called Page Speed Insights. You can put your page's link into there, link to your page, and what will happen is Page Speed Insights analyzes the content of a web page, then generates suggestions to make that page faster. And there's Ghostery. The Ghostery product isn't really a speed tool. It's primarily to identify and potentially block tracking technology, but it's also useful for troubleshooting. You should also be aware that a lot of your customers may be using tools like this or other potential blockers, so seeing what they have to say about you is very useful. There's also Web Page Test. This is a product sponsored by Google. This is an open source project and it shows loading, waterfall charts, page speed optimization, checks, and suggestions. We've got G3 Metrics. This has both freemium and pro versions. It shows page load times, requests, benchmarks, and visualizations. HTTP Watch, it's a commercial product. This allows for page debugging, network traffic debugging, automation testing, recommendations, and compare to others. And Pingdom, again, another commercial product. This offers heartbeat features, uptime monitoring, real user monitoring, load speed analysis, alert and incident reporting. And New Relic. This is yet another commercial product, large-scale testing platform, applications and network monitoring, request reporting, geographic performance, API testing, and so on. So with fixing problems, here are some of your overall goals. Get things rendering as soon as possible. And this follows an information sent type of pattern. You want to keep the user on the information sent of whatever they're doing. Let them keep doing it. Don't get in their way. And lack of speed can hurt you there. Minimally, let the user see the things that are happening. This can be called time to value. Get them some value and maybe they'll hang around, but show them a blank nothing and they're gone, and fast. So cutting down load time, we're going to get our diagnostics going. We're going to select some tools. You need to instrument your site as needed. You need to do code reviews. You need to remove components wherever possible. This not only reduces byte count and possible processing time, but also the number of network requests. Get rid of the junk. Comments, for example, are generally good, but unnecessary text and lines may have crept in over time. Use gzip compression as well. JavaScript in particular can be very problematic. Besides being interpreted in the browser, moving elements around, swapping CSS, and so on can slow things down, as well as the use of AJAX calls, which are generally a good thing for various types of functionality. jQuery, which has got a lot of wonderful capabilities to it, can be a decent chunk of code. In most cases, it's unquestionably needed, but be sure about this. If you can get away without it, that's something to consider. And can you use local storage and caching better? Optimize graphics and videos. While this is a well-known issue, it can easily be an afterthought. And next, consider a content delivery network. This could be expensive. This will require financial analysis, but getting content, especially heavy content, closer to users via edge-of-network servers can help. Can you do things to optimize your critical rendering path? And this is a somewhat advanced concept, but the goal is pixels to screen as soon as possible. Google has a whole free course on how to study and adjust rendering order. Progressive rendering can actually be what's called lazy, by only loading as items come into viewport or focus above the fold or other options. That pretty much covers our special focus on speed. As you can see, it's really, really important. It can make more difference than some of your actual valuable features. Thank you for attending this session, and I'll see you in the next section.